All right, welcome to this evening's session for the Young Adult Leadership Institute, Mastering Conflict with Communication with Dr. Dave Weinandy. We're going to begin with prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. It is good to give thanks to the Lord.
To sing praise to your name, O Most High.
In the Lord I'll be ever thankful. In the Lord I will rejoice. Look to God, do not be afraid. Lift up your voices, the Lord is near. Lift up your voices, the Lord is near. In the Lord I'll be ever thankful. In the Lord I will rejoice. Look to God, do not be afraid. Lift up your voices, the Lord is near. Lift up your voices, the Lord is near. We come before you, Holy Spirit, conscious of our sinfulness, but aware that we gather in your name. Come to us, remain with us, and enlighten our hearts. Give us light and strength to know your will, to make it our own, and to live it in our lives. Guide us by your wisdom, support us by your power, for you are God, sharing the glory of Father and Son. Amen.
Reading from 2 Corinthians. Whoever is in Christ is a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, new things have come. And all this is from God, who has reconciled us to himself through Christ, and given us the ministry of reconciliation. Namely, God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting their trespasses against them, and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. So we are ambassadors for Christ, as if God were appealing through us.
My mission of being in the heart of the people is not just a part of my life or a badge I can take off. It is not an extra or just another moment in life. Instead, it is something I cannot uproot from my being without destroying my very self. I am a mission on this earth. That is the reason why I'm here in this world.
Incline my heart according to your will, O Lord.
And speed my steps along your path.
The Lord Jesus built his holy people on the foundation of the apostles and prophets. In faith, let us pray.
Lord, come to the aid of your people.
You once called Simon the fisherman to join you in your mission.
Summon new workers who will bring the message of salvation to all peoples.
You calmed the waves so that your followers would not be drowned.
Guard your church, protect it from all dangers.
You sent Paul to preach the good news to a diversity of peoples.
Let the word of salvation be proclaimed to all.
You gathered your scattered flock around Peter after the resurrection.
Good shepherd, bring all your people together as one flock.
You gave the keys of your kingdom into the hands of your holy church.
Open the gates of that kingdom to all who trusted in your mercy while on earth. Let us join these prayers and those in the silence of our hearts to the one prayer the Lord has taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Let us pray together. God our Father, you give us the joy of celebrating the feast of the apostles Peter and Paul. Through them, your church first received the faith. Keep us true to their teaching. Grant this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. And may God bless us, protect us from all evil, and bring us to everlasting life. Amen.
Dave Weinandy is a professor at Aquinas College, where he teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in communication and management. Additionally, Dave Weinandy oversaw campus life at the college and has been awarded the Outstanding Faculty Member 3 times. Dave was also acknowledged with Aquinas College's Distinguished Service Award for his community service work. Dr. Dave Weinandy has earned a Bachelor of Science in Social Work, a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology and Counseling, a Master of Arts in College Student Personnel, and a PhD in interpersonal communication. Dave's expertise in communication discipline includes health communication, public speaking training, and interpersonal relationship development. Dr. Dave has conducted hundreds of seminars and workshops on such topics as public presentation, listening skill development, positive interpersonal relationships, conflict management, motivation, and customer service. Perhaps most importantly, David is very involved in the Western Michigan community as a volunteer and board member for numerous organizations, including Community Circle Theater, Bowling Green State University Alumni Association, Spectrum Health, the Van Andel Institute Purple Community, and the Miss Wheelchair America, Miss Michigan, and Miss Michigan Outstanding Teen Scholarship Programs. Please welcome former professor, Dr.
How official we've become. We go from like, let's share what we've learned in the past 2 weeks to all of a sudden reading that. But let me tell you a little bit about the way I'm going to approach our next hour and a half or so and what we're going to do. First of all, I have been at Aquinas College. That's the primary thing that I love to talk about. And I've been there, I started in 91, so it'll be like 31 years or something like that. And I love it. I love it there. It's an honor to be able to not just teach, but just be a part of such a community and create those types of friendships. If you want, we're going to talk about conflict, but if you want additional information in other areas or kind of for the rest of your life, you will have my contact. Well, it was emailed to all of you. You have my contact information, and I've been there for 31 years. I suspect I'll probably be there another 31 years. So that email address will stay good. So just contact me if you want information about listening skill development, or how you're making a big presentation and you want help with that, or anything that's communication related. Feel free to reach out. Usually when I say that, when I'm doing workshops, people will reach out, but they always reach out with like very personal things. It's not like, oh, well, can you help me with this? It's like, this person at work does this, or I'm having this conflict and the other person doesn't even know that we're in conflict. If the conflict is in my head, and can you help me to work through that? Or very frequently, quite frankly, it's about family issues, and people will say, sometimes it will be things like, you probably don't remember me, and I'm thinking, well, no, I don't, but not yet, give me more. I don't even know who you are. But they'll be like, my husband does da 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 da, or my boyfriend does this. Can you help with this? And I'm like, oh my, okay, yes, maybe I can, maybe I can't, but I can refer you someplace else. But we're all part of the community. I'm part of an educational community, so feel free to reach out. I want the information that I'm going to cover, somewhat is going to be review. I think it should be review. I will flip over in this chair, not literally, but if it's not, because I just think, wow, sometimes I think we know what to do and we know the right thing to do. And maybe I'm projecting myself onto you all, but I need to be reminded what's the right thing to do or how to resolve conflict or some practical things that we should or should not do. So I would be surprised if there's a bunch of, oh, wow, eureka, that type of moments, but very practical information. I also do have to tell you that I think that in some respects, this is a different time right now. Almost every time I speak, right now, the big topic that people want me to speak about is about how to be more positive in organizations, community service organizations, big like government organizations. I do a lot of work for Kent County, and they're like, can you come in and do how to be more positive or how to communicate in a more positive manner? And I said, okay, yeah, I can. And they're like, can you also mention, and then they tell me what to say. Can you also mention this, and this? And it's almost always about how, and I felt it as well. When the pandemic first hit in Dave's world, I am an introvert by nature. I'm an introvert who lives in an extroverted world and can be extroverted, but my core is an introvert. And so then I thought, oh my gosh, a pandemic, and I don't wish that upon anyone, and I'm still masking and things like that, but I said, this is going to be perfect. I get to stay home. It's just going to be me and the dog forever. It's like, for an introvert, that's like a dream come true. It was for a while, and then it wasn't any longer. And then as things progressed, and I don't know about you, the world's, and it's a culmination of different things, I think, but the world started getting nasty. It just was nasty. And I'm old. I've lived through nasty times. I've lived through like the Vietnam War and stuff like that. That was like, I mean, there were major protests and I worked at Kent State where 4 kids were killed and da-da-da-da-da. But it was a different type of nastiness I was seeing now about not just the pandemic, but politically. I mean, just recently with the Supreme Court, I mean, there's just like this attack mode, and people aren't even behaving any longer. And it feels like civility has gone out in some respects, even with friendships. And there's some friendships where I thought, wow, I never dreamed we would be in this place where it's like our values seem to be very different. And I started to feel almost a sense of anxiety about that. And I have never had anxiety in my entire life about anything. And all of a sudden I was like, why can't I sleep? What's going on? And I feel like conflict and even how we resolve conflict has changed over even the past 2 years, and not necessarily us specifically or us interpersonally, but society in general. It just goes into this attack mode almost, and as opposed to let's sit and talk and listen, and in some cases agree to disagree. And in some cases, I can't agree to disagree. I mean, that's not very politically correct to say, but it just goes so against my core values of who I am that I'm like, I need to be able to think about this longer and resolve this and such. But I feel like it's just a different world now. And I just feel like we have to acknowledge that when we talk about conflict. I have a zillion and million slides to go through. And this is so funny because if you ask my students, they're like, he is the one professor who uses no PowerPoint. Ever do I use PowerPoint. But I said, oh, all right, well, if you're going to have a hybrid kind of thing, and I can create, I think some of my students think, well, he doesn't know how, the poor little sweetie doesn't know how to do PowerPoint. I'm like, yes, I do. I just choose in communication classes not to use it. It's not like, next slide, write it down. Next slide, write it down. And that's what schools kind of become. But really quickly,
Yeah,
now
just
saying that.
A point of order real quick is we
Sure.
will send you the slides.
Yes.
So,
Oh, yes.
I mean,
yes.
certainly keep notes as you're going if you'd like, but we will send you
Oh,
what's
yes.
on the slides.
You most certainly will get the slides. just some key points that I just to start off with, some key points that I say every single time, and feel free to look at the screen. I know it's kind of weird. Like some of you are like, do I look at you? Do I look at the screen? Brooke, you can look wherever you want. Look at that cat. But just a few key points that I say every time I speak about communication. I feel like so often when I talk about conflict, people are like, oh, I'll use it in this area. I'll use it at work, or I'll use it professionally, or I'll use it here. And I'm like, no, communication needs to become a value. And if we value something, then it's going to be present everywhere. For example, I have friends who value, and I should say I do too, but not a whole lot, health. And I mean, I value my own health and I value other people's health, but do you know, and maybe you are these people who like, they work out a lot and they like, if somebody values health, it seems to be present, like when they pick out their food, they range like, oh, during my day, when am I going to have my little workout time or my yoga time or my peaceful time or whatever? That's a value if it's a part of your life. For some people, family obviously is a value. Finance for some of you is a value, and you think about finances constantly. Every time you make a purchase, some of you never think about those things when you make purchases. You're like, okay, well, whatever. But if you value it, you think about it all the time. You think about it all the time. Hopefully that's the case for our spirituality and our Catholicity. It doesn't just happen at church or in mass or whatever. It should be present, like in Dave's world at least. It should be present in my actions and in my words and in my thoughts all the time. I should be modeling it all the time. It's like, I should be Father Dave, okay? And I should be the one. It shouldn't just be that I look up to my spiritual leaders to model it. No, I should be modeling it. And I feel like communication should be that way. If we value it, we're going to use it every single place. And remember that. And if you say, well, I don't have conflict at work. What about family? What about, I've seen very few families that didn't have some conflict at some time. We're human. We're human with a full range of emotions. And some people say, no, we should only feel joy, especially in a session like this. We're talking about, we have a crucifix in every corner and we should be taught, you know, it's like, oh, it should be joy, joy, joy. I feel like, you know, and this is not a lecture in theology by any means, but I feel like God created all the emotions for Dave to experience, okay? He didn't say dwell on these, like don't dwell on these emotions, Dave, but it's okay to feel them, because sometimes even my anger and my frustration and my angst allows me to appreciate joy even more when it's present for me. But value your communication. I also say personalize the content. This is about nobody else but you. It's all about you. It's not about saying, oh, when he talks about the negative things we do in conflict, I can label all the people at work who do that, or all the people in my life who say those things. I don't care. I don't care. I always tell my students, who's anybody, by the way, it's not just in class. I tell them that, you know, I feel like Dave has control over Dave. I have no or little control over you all. I can't control what flies out of your mouth. I can't control what you do. I can't control what I hear on the news, but I can control how I react. And that's one thing that makes me different from my dog, for example, when she sees a bunny and she just impulsively starts running for it. It's like, no, 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 Dave has control. And that to me is personalizing it and saying, Dave, this is about you. Another key point, I'm going through these kind of quickly, but that I believe conflict, and I know it is, it's systemic and it's emotional. In other words, sometimes people think, oh, conflict only, like conflict at work. I work with some major organizations where there are some people in cubicles who don't get along. And they're like, okay, Dave, will you work with these people specifically? And I'm like, sure, I will. I can help them. And they seem to think that nobody else at work knows what's going on, or it doesn't have any effect. It's like, well, why do they care? It's just about the two of us and da 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 da. And I don't get along with her, but it doesn't affect anybody else. In the meantime, everybody else is tiptoeing around their cubicles. And I'm like, what? What? It's systemic. Conflict can affect the whole system. Shoot, if you've ever lived with people, you know that if like when you're growing up, if mom and dad are mad, or brother and sister or whomever are angry at each other, it affects the whole tone of the house. It's systemic. It's also emotional. Conflict is emotional. You're far too rational right now. If I were to say, and I don't do this, but I would say role play conflict, oh, you would have your little thinking hats on, and you would be very professional, and you all look nice and stuff, and you would be, but oh, it'd just be intellectual conflict. And then I say this, is this correct thing to say, Dave? Da, 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 da. What's missing is the emotion that we sometimes feel that makes us act stupid. It does. It's just straight up irrational. And all of a sudden, the same people I've mentored or coached, and I've said, okay, what do we say in these situations? We say this. Why did I just hear you scream out, I hate you? It's like, we never said that was part of this. It's like, we need to recognize that conflict is emotional and that we can have some control over that. It doesn't mean that the emotions overtake us. We can still have some control over our emotions. And lastly, in terms of the key points, not lastly, is that motivation, I think, is critical. If you want to resolve conflict, you will. If you don't want to, I don't care how many sessions you've gone through. I don't care how many things you've learned. If it's not done in your head, you won't let it be done. You won't let it be done. I think some people say that okay, let's resolve this conflict, but really what they want to do is they want to express their feelings one more time to the other person. It's like, I want you to understand how I feel. And I feel like that's not happening. So that's what we're going to do in this conflict, even though I told you I want to get together so we can resolve this. Really, we're not going to resolve this until I say it one more time. If you're not ready to resolve it, it's probably not going to be resolved. But why aren't you? Why can't you be motivated to resolve conflict? We all can. We all can. Truly, is it worth it in the long run? Maybe I'm just old and I have a different perspective, that I'm like, you know what? It's just not worth the angst it creates for me sometimes. Sometimes it is. It doesn't mean I don't take a stand on things, but sometimes it's not. This part I will race through, because I felt like, because I get your readings at a time, like, well, not all of them, just the ones related to this session. And I read them and I was like, oh, I love them. I love your readings. And so like I had the 6 agreement things that I shouldn't be telling you about, that just really quickly. I don't know why I put this on this, why I couldn't just have 6 things fly up, but I guess I don't use PowerPoint very well. But I think all of these 6 things, I just think these are very powerful statements. And obviously these are not the full statements or whatever, but I abbreviated, and I think they all relate to conflict. When you're in conflict, especially with an internal audience, not with an external audience, not with company, when company comes, I think we act our silliest with our internal people, with the people family, people we work with, we say, you'll be back. You'll be back because you have to be, okay? And then all of a sudden company comes over and we put on our company manners. And when an audience is present, I think sometimes it's with the internal audience that in conflict, some of these things do go away. I mean, this whole aspect of affirming inherent worth and value, how in a conflict situation that you've been in, how would the other person really know that you feel that? It's easy for us to say, yes, Dave, I commit to these 6 agreements. And I'd say, yes, they're going to guide my life and I'm going to feel them. I'm going to say, everybody does have value and worth. If I'm in conflict with you And if I can't see what's in your heart, and that's a great place to start, by the way, to have the feelings in your heart, but I can't see your heart. I can't see caring when it's internal. How do you operationalize it? How do you show me, even in conflict, that I do have value, that I do have worth? Do you truly listen to me? Oh, the next, do you listen to understand, or do you listen to collect data, to refute, to make your point even stronger? It's like, well, no, it's not. I understand you. You don't understand me. So I'm going to listen to you so that I can figure out a different way to persuade you to understand my reality. It's like, that's not listening to understand, and also showing the other person they have value and worth. Why are you even listening? Ask yourself that. Taking responsibility. I would add taking responsibility and showing compassion at the same time, because a lot of times I hear people say, oh yeah, in conflict, I took responsibility. I'm representing a lot of people in my conflict who are voiceless. And I want to be able to represent them. And that's why I'm standing up for this issue, which is important, by the way. But are you doing it in a way that also shows compassion to the other person or to the other group, or even recognizing that everybody doesn't have to think like you? Or guess what? All Catholics don't have to think the same way. And don't have to interpret, I mean, some basics, I would hope, but don't have to interpret every single thing the exact same way. And maybe even in conflict, I can listen in a way that allows me to be responsible enough to want to learn from the other person. And that's probably not a time when we're our best learners, when we're mad, when we're angry. But why can't we be? Why can't we just jump back and say, no. I always say with these 6, especially, it's like, if I followed these 6, I would be being, horrible syntax, the Dave I want to be, not the Dave I am. And that's my big goal in life, is to say, I know the Dave I want to be, and every day I'm going to do my darndest to strive to be that guy. And that includes taking responsibility for my actions when I've done something that is naughty, or just, I mean, not naughty, like naughty with a capital N, but naughty in terms of like, I just treated somebody poorly. It's like, I need to take responsibility for that. And I don't just say time will heal everything. I say, no, what will heal, Dave, is an apology for what you did and what you said, even if the other person doesn't even realize it. It's like they deserve that. Making room for diverse voices, obviously, embracing ambiguity. Oh my gosh, the road to resolving conflict is filled with ambiguity. And those of you who are black and white, hard facts, data people, ambiguity is not your friend. Gray is not your friend, most probably. But sometimes we need to embrace that. And say, it's okay along the way, it's okay. And then preserving the integrity of stories. I think that to me is recognizing that everybody does have a story, and everybody has a different version of reality. And so often what we want to do in communication is we want to create a shared reality between us. And a shared reality is not Dave pushing his reality onto somebody else and my thoughts and my beliefs. It's saying, let me try to truly understand. It doesn't, understanding you doesn't mean I have to become you. And so often I deal like with new students who come in to the college, who a lot of times they come from very homogeneous high schools. And I say, you know what? Sit next to the person who is least like the person who you would hang out with. The person who has tattoos all over their body and is pierced all over and has done this and has done that. It's like, you learn from them. Listen, they're interesting, if nothing else. It doesn't mean you become them, but you do owe respect to them. And I think that's preserving the stories. It's being able to to understand also that sometimes the stories are emotional stories. And sometimes we have to listen for emotions. Sometimes all people, I think, in conflict want is they don't need for you to say it's okay, or you were wrong, or you were right, or whatever. I think a lot of times all we want is to be validated. All I want is to say, I mean, there have been times in customer service situations where I have said, no, I just had one with the city the other day. They sent me a violation letter because my stupid trash bag for the, well, you can see where this is going. For the like lawn waste thing or whatever, it got wet and it broke because it rained. And so they wouldn't take it. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, no big deal. You shouldn't sell stupid bags that don't hold up, but okay, I'll buy another one. But then they stuck a violation tag on it. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. And then they sent me a violation letter and said, if you don't correct this, and by the way, I went out and put it in another bag. It was so simple. They said, we will put a lien on your house if you don't pay the violation. I'm like, what violation? I wasn't violated. I'm like, what? So then I had to write a little letter back to them and said, oh, by the way, I said, I giggle at that you had so much time to write this letter and da. But if we go back and forth, I don't need for them to tell me that I'm right, or I'm not going to tell them that they're right, but I want them to understand that that probably doesn't create the best community relations. And I want to just feel validated. And sometimes I think all we need to hear is that you had the right to feel as you felt. Even if I don't agree, you have the right to feel frustrated. Or I remember one time in the situation, somebody said to me, and she diffused the whole conflict situation by just saying, you must have been so angry at us. At the time, it happened to be an airline. And she said, you must have been so angry. And I said, I was. And she said, I would have been too. She said, now what can we do? And I'm like, you already did it. All I needed was for somebody to say, it was okay for me to feel the way I felt. You can't fix it. It's already been done. It's okay. Okay, Dave, move on. Then I haven't even gotten to my part yet. I'm still about your part, which, some key ideas from your readings. And I loved your readings. And it's so out of context to just pull out whatever it is. I have horrible eyesight, 5 little bullet points or whatever. But I think these readings are such life lessons, for me at least. Don't be afraid of holiness. It will take away none of your energy, vitality, or joy. Unresolved conflict and inhumane conflict, it does take away my energy, vitality, and joy. I look at the opposite and I'm like, how does this relate to conflict? Oh, yeah, I agree with all of that. I think sometimes that when I see people, including every one of us in this room, because we're human beings who make mistakes, when we act in a childish or inhumane way, that does take away not just the other person's joy, but our joy. It really, especially the people in this room, seriously. Mercy includes forgiveness and understanding. And we've all heard this how many times, forgive and do so 7 times 7, 70 times 7 times, of course. Again, how often do we actually do that? Or do we just hear it in a homily? Do we hear it in, whatever? And then we say, oh, yes, forgive. Do we really do that, or work at the forgiveness? And I like also where it says where it mentions that, it doesn't say that blessed are those who plot revenge. Okay, it doesn't say blessed are those who treat people like crap. No. And your heart is where you store holiness, of course. But again, that's a start for me. It's where I store holiness, but I need to act it out after that. How would people know that you feel it, that you store it there? What do you do? What do you say? How do you act? Like, I want an action to go with it, or words to go with it. But that's a great start. It is where I store holiness. War can be created through words as much as action, of course. Fortunately, so can peace. I think peace to me is not passive. It's not passive. It's not the absence of war. I have to work at peace, just like somebody else would have to work at war and conflict. I literally do have to work at that. And I love the fact that I read one time on Facebook, okay, not the most reliable source, but I'll admit it at least, that peace is not the absence of trouble, it's the presence of Christ. And I thought, I read that and it just struck me, and I'm like, you're right. Peace isn't the absence of trouble in my life. Peace is the presence of Christ. And I know I always, in conflict or otherwise, no matter where I am, no matter how alone I feel in the world, I always have him on my side. He's always part of the Dave team. If I let him be part of the Dave team, and he can help me to create peace and that unbusyness feeling that leads to peace, at least for me. And that conflict is not simply about fighting, it's about treating people poorly. I agree. I think sometimes I take conflict at the broader scale. It's not just like when you're in conflict, having a fight or wars or whatever we're doing, all this stuff, constantly people protesting and stuff. Okay, that's one type of conflict. Conflict for me is also when people are just on a day-to-day basis, not treated well, or as well as they could be, to recognize their humanness and their value, and to be able to say, did I even unintentionally bully somebody or make fun of somebody? Or, I have a friend who one time was watching TV shows, and they're like funny TV shows that would sometimes inadvertently or in a socially acceptable way make fun of people who were disabled. And it was just kind of like fun, but there was be a moral to the story at the end. And I'm like, no, for me, that is conflict. And I said, you know what? I love you to death, and I loved hanging out with you, but I cannot be a part of this. I can't watch this because I feel like I'm passively accepting it if I watch it. I can't listen to that. I can't pass along the little YouTube videos or whatever that are goofy, or even some of the things that I think are just straight up mean. It's like, no, that to me is conflict. It's a broader sense of conflict. Okay, what else? Okay, so 3 questions that I would ask, and I think we're going to abbreviate this a little bit, but I do want us to just talk about this. I was going to put us into little groups and blah, 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 talking about this, but we are a little group, darn it, so we can just do it this way. And I think these 3 questions are just very practical. Let's start with the second one. In your world, in your life, what can cause conflict or make it worse? What makes it worse for you? Anyone? You won't be on camera, but your voice will be. Potentially. What makes conflict worse for you? Anything?
I think ignoring it, like pretending that it's not happening, or that it's not as big of a deal as it is.
I agree. I was just thinking to myself, I was like, and I thought to myself, well, why? Because I think for many of us, ignoring it causes it to just fester in our head. And I don't know about you, but especially when I'm trying to sleep at night, it's like, oh my gosh, suddenly I'm like twirling around in bed like crazy, getting no sleep because it's in my head, and things just feel bigger at night for me or whatever. But okay, what else? What else makes it worse or can cause it?
Addressing it, but not coming to a resolution.
But why? Well, there's various reasons why we cannot come to resolution, I guess, because it's not simple, and it can't be resolved.
I think for me, the first thing that came to mind was like something at work where I had like gone to HR and presented something, and it's like, oh yeah, we'll look into it. Thanks for taking the time. And then there was nothing that came out of it.
Right.
So I guess that that it's there, but they're not doing anything to
resolve it.
Most certainly. And in most cases, in communication, we know that ignoring is oftentimes received worse than somebody saying something nasty to you. Like even in a relationship, when somebody ignores you, it's like, what? Or you feel like you don't have value or worth. I don't even get a response from you. It's like, what? At least give me a nasty response. It's like, but in those types of cases where it's like, wait, there's no follow-up or whatever. It feels like this didn't matter to you, and it mattered to me. And I don't know why I'm making this so personal on me, McKenna, but it feels like it's like I'm not valued enough for it to even matter. Anything else that makes it worse or causes it?
Well, I just want to build on the ignoring.
Sure.
I think about someone has a concern and they can bring it to someone else's attention, and if it's ignored, then, well, I know for me, most of the time it becomes a complaint. Now I either complain to that person or I'm complaining to other people. Without addressing it because I'm looking for help. Help me with this. I have this concern, it's not being addressed, and I start complaining.
Right.
But an ignored complaint, I think, then takes it to that next level of conflict.
And sometimes,
Especially when someone hears my complaint and then I can't say doesn't do anything.
right. And it's almost like it becomes a drama then. And it's like the drama now has to, because we want validation from somebody. So I'll be darned. I'm going to tell Zach, it was Zach, right? Yeah. I'm going to tell Zach, like, you're never going to believe what happened. And it's like, and even though I know you can't fix it and it's not even your drama, and I don't even know why I'm involving you, except that it's like, it's a hit and run. You would just happen to be there. So it's too bad, Zach. And it's like, and so I tell you all about it, knowing that you can't really do anything about it. But now all of a sudden it's potentially, because not with Zach, because of course Zach won't tell the silly people, but it can take on a life of its own. And it can become like this whole undercurrent story that's going on. And it's, exactly. So what can be done to encourage conflict resolution? Anything? I mean, I'll tell you things, but
I think something that comes to mind, like what Mark was talking about earlier, where you can't correct someone without having a relationship with them. And I think a lot of the places that we see conflict, like you're talking about, are internal conflicts. So like within families or organizations. And I think a big part of that is laying a foundation of relationships so that when difficult conversations come, you are already in a position, you are already in that relationship. You already have that understanding of integrity and respect to have the harder conversations.
And yes, and I don't know why I feel like I have to comment after everybody gives their little thing. I have to add to it. Like I know what's in your head, but I think even being able to say at some point, like, I mean, sometimes we need to hear it, especially in conflict. You know what? I do care about you, and I do love you, and then, but I don't agree. But I don't agree, because some people start to doubt whether you do care and whether you do love me simply because of disagreement. Maybe even because that's what's happened to me in the past, and all these monsters keep coming up from the past, and I really, just hearing it makes it more real. It's like, okay, yes, I know you do love me, with the beginning and an ending to the conflict, being able to say, you know what, I care about it. If I didn't care about you and the issue, we wouldn't even be discussing this. We wouldn't even be discussing it. Anything else that we can do to
I
improve?
wonder if Brooke has anything she'd like to add.
I don't know.
She might not be able to.
Oh, Brooke.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I didn't
No,
doubt whether you were here.
Thank you, Dave.
But we just wanted to make sure. I know. I love you, Brooke. But we just wanted to make sure that you have a chance to contribute as well, or if you had any ideas. No pressure to encourage conflict resolution, or what have you done in your life it's like, wait, that worked kind of well, or at least it's the Brooke method. We all have different methods.
I don't know that I have a great comment to that, but I'll just say, a lot of the things that people shared really resonate with me. The role that I serve in at work, there are a lot of concerns that are brought forward to my department on a daily basis. And it can be a lot to manage, and we want people to feel heard. We want to make sure that people feel like their concerns are being heard and addressed. I think just sometimes with the sheer volume, it can be hard to keep up, which causes some of that internal conflict because we want to, it's a dissatisfier for us too, and we feel like we can't get to all of them. So not really a solution or a Brooke method, but just something that comes to mind for me as you guys are talking.
Mhm. And what you're saying kind of reminds me also that not all conflict is going to be resolved in a neat little package of a conversation. It just isn't. And sometimes it just doesn't get resolved. And then we have to decide, how can I resolve it? Or how can I ask God to help me to resolve this in my head so that I don't feel the anxiety that this is created? Because I don't think that that's what any of us want. Any of us want. The first question, would you expect, I shouldn't even, I think this is kind of leading actually because of the way I asked it, but would you expect someone who is faith-driven to act out conflict differently? Like if I'm going to, I don't even know where, the Macy's and having conflict, and I don't even know why I would be having conflicts, and I don't go to Macy's, but versus all of a sudden I see conflict within the parish or the church or here or whatever. Are the expectations different, do you think, by most people in terms of whether there should be conflict, whether there could be conflict, or whether the conflict could be resolved or not? Brooke, a lot of people are shaking their heads yes, so I will resound that. Do you think that it's fair for us to expect a faith-driven community to be able to resolve conflict differently? Yes. Why do you think that? Was it Bridget?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we can go back to like a very basic kind of level, but like I used to be a preschool teacher, and you kind of have to set certain expectations and like boundaries if you want them to like meet them a lot of the time. So like if we don't expect a faith community and like give them tools to act it out differently, like what kind of community is it? Like I don't know, like I feel like, I mean, to a certain degree, like you can't judge the people for what they're feeling, of course, and there's a lot of like really, you can break it down a lot more, but like just as a broad, like would I expect like the church to handle something? Yes, it doesn't always happen that way, but I do have that expectation and that like kind of like expectation of them.
Right. I think that, you know, I'll go out on a limb and say I think that that's a very fair expectation. I feel like it should be a safer space in terms of, again, civility and conflict and being able to not always be calm, but be calm in an internal sense of being able to say, okay, I really have strong convictions about this, but I would hope in a faith-based community that people would listen and not use, I don't know how else to say it, but sometimes almost dirty tactics or strategies or manipulative strategies, because I don't feel like that is consistent at all for me. And when I've seen it, I've worked with a lot of parishes on like raising money and doing things like that. And I love doing those things, those little auctions and stuff. But I'm like, but what will drive me away is when all of a sudden it's like all of this conflict and drama and things like that. And I'm like, no, church for me is fun. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be, it doesn't mean that we can't disagree, but the disagreeing should not overtake the sense of, you know, we can't begin with a prayer and then act like fools and then end with a prayer. Okay, you can quote me on that if you want to. But you know, but yeah, I just feel like that on a practical level, you know what I mean? It's like we can't, I don't know. It's, again, we're human, we make mistakes, but I do have expectations that are going to be different in a faith-based community. And you know what, like it or not, I think most people do when they come to that type of community. They do when they're at Aquinas, they should be. I should be acting more ethically. But okay, some types of conflict. Oh, we're gonna go through this so fast because it's like this is schooly. Some different types of conflict you can have. And the reason this is important, by the way, is that the type of conflict can dictate how it gets resolved. And oftentimes we both have to agree how we define the conflict. Like civil conflict, okay, calm and rational. We don't have that very often. Deja vu conflict is a repetitive conflict. Any of you have had repetitive conflict over and over? Do you know that in many cases why we're having that? And it feels like, no, we're leading. I mean, we go to counseling, right? And therapy to resolve these types of things because they're ongoing. A lot of times with deja vu conflict or conflict that repeats itself, we're actually addressing symptoms and we're not addressing the issues initially. It's like, that's the part that is coming up. And it's like, no, we need to address where is this coming from? Not how are we acting it out? And that's where we oftentimes go with deja vu conflict. Silent conflict, it's like, and we've talked about this already, but sometimes you know that it's hard to have conflict with somebody who won't talk to you. It's like, or won't respond to your emails or your texts or anything. It's like, and some people deal with conflict that way. It's not, I never said it was healthy, but indirect conflict or passive aggressive conflict. Oftentimes, it's not just that people are being passive aggressive, by the way, because they're nasty people. Sometimes I think people are passive aggressive, especially in organizations when we have conflict, because they feel powerless. And the only way I can have power is by being passive aggressive. One time, I can't tell too much, I guess, but for a government Kent County organization, I was interviewing about 40 different people in the organization because they were having horrible issues. Horrible racial issues, just every issue you could think of. And I said, I just want to sit and talk with each person and then we'll talk in mass. Otherwise, it just feels like it's like this gang mentality. And there are like little gangs in here. And I'm like, oh, you're all scaring me. And at one point I was sitting down with a woman and I knew she felt powerless to make any decisions, even though she had a title to make a decision, because she would say something. And after she said it, she would say, I would say, well, what do you think is the solution? Well, this is the solution. But do you know what she would follow it up with almost every time? But who am I to say? I'm a nobody here. Da, 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 da. And I said, no, you need to stop saying, first of all, you're annoying. Okay, stop saying that. It's just annoying. It's like, no, you are a person. If you're a human being, you have value. You can say something, but don't discount it afterwards and be passive aggressive about it. But I understood why she was being that way. And I said, let's address that. Mock conflict is playful conflict. It's not real conflict. You probably have this with your family member or siblings have this all the time, or, good friends, best friends who will joke around. The hard part is when somebody tries to join in, like who's not part of it. Like, and all of a sudden they're like, it's like, your mama to you. It's like, no, you can't say that. What? No. These people can say it, but these other people. It's only mock conflict if we both agree. Sometimes I think people will say those things and they'll be, oh, you knew I was just kidding. You knew it. I was just kidding. You can't take a joke. Oh, you're so sensitive. Well, first of all, stop judging me. But it's like, and I don't think you were kidding. I think you just wanted to get that out there and then you're discounting it. Blow up conflict obviously is crazy. It's irrational and hostile. Two others I didn't list, but the most important ones, ideational conflict is when we have conflict about ideas, policies, interpretations, processes, decisions, procedures. It's what we often have at work what we have in life. I may not agree that, I don't even know who should be allowed to park out in front of the diocese offices. And I may say, no, that's a stupid policy. that these people can park here and these people can't, and and all this stuff, or that they're giving tickets or whatever, or that they're ticketing your trash bag. That I might say that that's a dumb policy. That's ideation. It's about an idea. We also have, come on, little clicker. Oh, there we go. We have relational conflict, and this is not based on rationality. And it can be rooted in a variety of things. It can be rooted on value differences. For example, a value difference might be that somebody asks you to stay after at work, and maybe family time is one of those values you have, and you say, no, I won't stay after. And people see it as, oh, you're not loyal. You're not loyal. You're not a team member. I thought we were all a team. It's like, well, no, I just value family first, and I have responsibilities and stuff like that. It can be a value difference. It can be in personality differences. You know, we're human. Sometimes we just don't care for somebody's personality. Oh, it seems so horrible to say that, but I know you've met people who you just say, I'm going to pray about this. Oh, I'm going to pray about this, but you are a no. You are just a no to me. I don't like the way you breathe. I don't like the way, I mean, you're just a no. You know, your personality just doesn't fit in the Dave puzzle. Okay, it doesn't fit, but it still can be a valid personality. It's just, we're just different humans, or interpreting roles differently. Oh my gosh, so often I will see people, oh, at school. I was overhearing in the cafeteria one time, and not like I lurked there, just over here. But I heard some students arguing, and I was like, and I was eating with another family member, listening. And they were arguing about, it happened to be, and this isn't very pleasant. It happened to be, I think, about a cheating situation. Two gentlemen were talking about it, and the one was mad because he said, if you were really my best friend, you would have had my back. You would have had my back. You would have stuck up for me. You would have done this. You would have done that. And he was like, no, a best friend doesn't do that, or doesn't. We can interpret roles differently, or even the role of mother. How does one act out that role? Just because we act it out differently, and mother is a verb. Mother doesn't have to be a, you know, it doesn't mean that the other person's wrong, just because we interpret roles differently. And then perceptual differences. Some people perceive, you know, I don't know, coming in late as no big deal. And some people see it as incredibly disrespectful. Okay, it's just perceptual differences. It's like, whatever. It appears less professional, certainly, if we have these types of, we don't oftentimes get to voice these types of things in a work environment or a professional situation. We don't just say, oh, I don't like your personality. I mean, please, how often at a meeting do you get to say things like that? But I would ask you, how often do we claim ideational conflict when it's really relational conflict? How often have you, okay, and if you say, well, not me, okay, then let's use the generalized others. Have other people disagreed with a policy, not because of the policy, but because of the person who presented the policy? You're at a team meeting and somebody presents something and you don't listen with an open mind. Your little mind is a little more closed today. And it's like, no, you didn't support me the last time I brought something forward. So unfortunately, you need to be spanked. You need to be punished. And so I'm going to punish you and you won't even know you're going to be punished. So I'm not going to support your idea either. And all of a sudden you're coming up with opposition that you don't even believe in. But it's because the person, I think sometimes, and not to get political, because I am not political. I don't know. But I think I see my friends like who are like, oh, a view will be put forward. And when they find out that it was one party or the other, or one religion or another who proposed it, then all of a sudden they hate what was proposed. And I was like, wait, you didn't mind it 2 seconds ago. It's like, I think oftentimes we confuse the two. We confuse the two. And I think we just have to be real and say, where the heck is this conflict coming from? Where is it coming from? All right. And my goodness. Okay, some possible, just a few. We'll go through real quickly. Possible factors influencing, it's kind of cut off, but it says factors influencing attitude during conflict. How you process. Some of you are internal processors and some of you are external processors. Some of you, and if you're in a relationship with the opposite, it's probably not easy. But if some of you probably, you think through things in your head and then you proclaim your decision at the end and it's like you've thought about it. And some of you just talk it out loud. Even with the other person, you're still thinking. You're the people who probably talk to yourself. Like when you have a problem, you will be by yourself. I do this at home and I'll say it out loud. And it's like that helps me to process, but that can affect conflict. My sister is, well, she's an alpha to begin with, but she is in the family. She is an external processor and I am not. And so she will say things and I'm like, what to me? And I'm like, what? Why did you say that? I drove to Ohio to help you clean a garage and you're talking to me this way. I'm like, but do you know what she also does? And I have to remember this with her being an external. It's done as soon as she says it. And then she'll be like, okay, da 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 da. And I'm still, still angry. And I'm like, no, people just process differently. Perception of communication norms. Some of you, I used to do this when I would advise student groups. I would say, okay, the first thing we're going to do is I have a sheet actually that I can give you later that has a bunch of norms. And it says, should or should not do these things. Should a person do these or not do these things? In your world, things like in a team meeting, should you call somebody out if you don't agree with their idea? Especially an executive group or something, or a staff. Should you call somebody out? Do you know there would be people who would write should not? No, you do this one-on-one. If you have a problem with me, do not bring it forward in front of the group. And other people are like, oh yeah, I would do that. And I would want you to do that with me. If you don't agree with something I say, just say it. Tell me. I don't care if there's an audience. Just tell me. It's not that we are intentionally trying to anger the other person. We just have different norms for what's normal for us. And I think if sometimes whenever I get groups together that I'm advising or new work teams or whatever, I say, okay, what are our communication rules going to be from the very beginning? So that I don't think, oh my gosh, Cecilia, she called me out in front of everyone. She said, Dave, when are we going to take a break? Da, 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 da. And she called me out in front of everyone. Mild call out, but a call out nonetheless. And I might say, you don't do that. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And I might have all of a sudden all these internal motivations as to why you did this. And it might create more conflict. If we could deal with this proactively, it would be a lot easier. Who knows about the conflict? The moral of the story, don't have conflict in front of an audience. Just don't. People play up to an audience. People don't like to lose in front of an audience. Take it offline if possible. Your physical state, personality, mood, that affects how you, some of you who are not morning people, okay, you should not be having your conflict in the morning, okay? Or probably should not be interacting in the morning. For some of you, if you're sleep deprived, or that's one for me, or the hungry thing, or in some cases, I think if you've ever had a migraine or a bad headache, and then it's like, okay, conflict is sitting right here, right on top of this migraine today, but that can affect it. The channel used, some people like to have their conflict, or conflict can be augmented through email. It just can, and I think, why don't you just pick up the phone? Why don't people can read things into the email? So easily. It's like, why are you doing this? No, 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 no. Or I've had people who have conflict through text messaging. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm not that good of a texter to begin with. I'm like, no, I'm like, you win, because I'm just not dealing with that. And then I think feeling listened to or not can affect how we act in a conflict situation. Where am I pointing? Come on, little thing. Well, oh, no.
Oh, sorry, Dave. Here, try it on.
Okay. Oh, someone took control. Interesting. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, so one thing I do want you to do, there are all types of conflict instruments. Like if we were really going to be here and we had $1 billion, I would probably be implementing like DISC or one of the other big conflict things that we can do and chart you. But one that some of you have already taken that I do want you to take, a very simple little 30-question instrument that you can see 1974. Oh, Brooke, it's in your email. But 1974 is when it came out. And some of you might say 1974, I wasn't, well, first of all, the 70s were very good. Do not discount them. But it's been tested for validity and reliability over and over again. What I want you to do really quickly, it's only 30 questions, is I want you to take this and I want you to circle, either it's a forced choice, A or B, for each one of these. Alas,
All right. So,
it should, okay,
and Michael B.
okay, so don't wait, okay.
Go ahead.
All right, so did you scored your thing? Okay, did anybody, and I will say just a few things about this, does somebody still have control?
Well, it's, I
Thank-
clicked on the.
Okay, no, it's okay. I wasn't talking about you in particular, Mark. You know, I don't do PowerPoint very often, so. Okay, so some thought, did anybody get on any of their scores of 0 or 1 or 11 or 12? Any? Did you? What can it, may I ask?
Collaborating, problem solving.
0.
I don't want.
Okay, all right.
Your strengths.
I know, that's why I'm like, I'm confused.
It's okay. It's okay. Anybody? Well, I will say that those scores, an 11 or 12 or whatever, 0 or 1, are unusual. They're not normative scores, but realize also, and just a few things. Oops.
No, sorry, Brooke is sharing that competing.
Oh, okay. I can't. Okay, and I can't read that far.
So competing.
Oh, okay. Very okay. Wow. All right. That's interesting, especially Brooke, if you're paired up with somebody who scores really high in avoiding, then it's like either a match made in heaven or not. But just, are there good or bad scores to this? Thomas and Kilman would say that there are not good or bad scores because a strategy is not good or bad. Collaboration is not good or bad. Conflict or competing rather is not good or bad. Avoiding is not good or bad. It's when to use the strategy that's good or bad. They would actually say the best, if anybody had a relatively flat score, if you look on the bottom and you say, my gosh, mine are like within like, I got a lot of 6s, 5s, 7s or whatever, that they would probably say is the best score that you could get, because it probably means that you're equally comfortable using any of the strategies, or equally uncomfortable using any of the strategies. Realize also, this does not measure what you do. It doesn't measure what you do. It measures your preferred strategy, and there's a difference. And so, especially if some of you are in situations or in a job where you have to compete a lot, but you score low on competition, it probably causes more angst for you or anxiety for you. But it's measuring, it doesn't mean that you can't do any of these strategies, but what it's measuring is your preferred strategy. And what I always ask is, I always have work teams fill this out and or family members, and I say, okay, don't tell what you got, but now I'm going to say, okay, everybody tell me what you think, if you all know each other, what Zach scored. What was his highest one and what was his lowest one or whatever. And it leads to an interesting discussion about conflict before we're in conflict. Okay. And to talk about different strategies and say, oh no, that's not what I do. And that's not what I like the most or what I feel most comfortable with. Some other things that you'll see in your handouts when you get them or open them. I put down some 4 steps basically that you should follow in conflict, and they're not like simple, but and I really do follow these. I have to be honest with you, I don't have conflict a whole lot, like interpersonal conflict. I'm just not a conflicty person, but there was one person that I had conflict with, and it wasn't even an active conflict, but it was just a weird conflict. And it got to the point where I was almost ready with this person to say, I'm gonna have to get like a personal protection order or something, because it's unhealthy. You're like, I don't know, it's just unhealthy. And I just, no. After it happened to be the one time, of course, I have conflict with somebody. It's somebody I run into like every other day. Like it has to be that person. And we were in the same social situation or professional situation. So every time I would see him in these situations, a lot of times church related situations. And I thought, this is so uncomfortable and so bizarre. And do you know how you've been in conflict long enough? And after a while, I mean, after like 2 years, I was like, why were we even, what was this about? Like, why were we fighting? And I'm like, this isn't even me, but it was such a pattern that I felt like I couldn't get out of it. Like, now what do I say? Now what do I do? And so my first step, because I said, I am going to do something about this, is I thought that this person, by the way, was a good person. I was like, what went wrong? Like, why? And things do go wrong with 2 good people. But the first thing you have to do is prepare, and literally prepare and say, you know, I role played it in my head. And do you do that with conflict? Say, oh, I say this, and then they'll say this. And it's cool. That helps you, but don't stay stuck to your role play. Like, don't get thrown off when they don't say their part. Okay. And that's what sometimes happens. But I did all of these mental things beforehand. And I just said, you know, why am I getting together? Some people, I think, get together and say, I want to get together with you, if that's what's going to be the next step, just to get one more jab in. And some people get together to actually resolve it. And I just thought to myself, I don't want this to be the way it's going to be. So I took it to step 2, which is invited the other person. And I happened to just email this guy. And I said, you know, after 2.5 years or whatever, I bet you're surprised to hear from me. And would you ever be interested in getting together? And if not, I totally get it. It's like, you know, but I just want to feel like I've at least extended the branch. And 2 seconds later, I got an email back saying, that would be great. And I was like, what? Were you like sitting waiting for this? I was like, oh my gosh, you know, and I was like, oh, okay, good. And it made me, talk about joy, it made me happy just to get that. Now, I have to tell you, one time I was coaching somebody through this process, and I said, okay, now, do you want to write an email? Yes, I want to write an email. Okay, because email allows you to choose your words more carefully and stuff in a sensitive situation. And I looked at the time, I said, can I read it? And she said, I want you to read it. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not proofing for grammar and stuff like that. So don't be doing that. But I'm like, okay, so I read it. And at the top it said, and I'm like, I understand what you mean, but it can be, we need to talk. And it was like, do you understand that we can read this so differently? Like we need to talk. Versus and I'm like, no, we need to retitle this email, this invitation. This is not a command, is not an invitation. So the next thing you do is you get together and you discuss. We happened to decide, I said, where do you want to get together? He picked a coffee shop. And I was like, okay, I don't even know this coffee shop, and I was all nervous. I was all nervous going there. And I'm like, why are you nervous? You're the one who started this. I'm like, but we got together, and I just say common things, show alert nonverbals, not your sassy ones, not your sassy nonverbals. Okay. Your alert nonverbals, and realize that your point of view is just that. It's your point of view. It's not factual. And you don't know how they feel. I don't like it when people tell me how I feel. When people say, like I had somebody yesterday text me this and say, you're angry at me. And I'm like, I'm not angry. I'm like, what did I do? It was like, you didn't answer back fast enough. And so you must be mad. And I'm like, do you know all the things I'm doing? And I don't just sit by my texter or whatever. I don't do that. I'm like, I'm not angry, but it just went on. And I said, stop telling me how I feel. It's like, we're going to have a conflict in a second. And just decide, like when we discussed it, I sat down and I said, okay, I would just like to tell you how I feel and what I think, and then I'm going to be quiet and I want you to talk. And they said, you don't have to agree with anything, but I just want to tell you. And I was as sincere as I possibly could be and just said, these are things that I did wrong, I'm sure, and that you did wrong. And I was just like emptied my heart and said, this is not the way I want it to be. I just don't want it to be this way, and I'm uncomfortable. And if you do, I totally respect that at this point. And then I just was quiet. And he said, no, that's exactly how I feel. That is exactly how I feel. And I don't want it to be that way. And then the fourth step, of course, is to listen and to really listen to the other person. And in my particular case, I will tell you that this person ended up becoming like my best friend after this was all over. And I thought, okay, top this, that I was ready to get a personal protection order. I mean, it's not hopeless. It's never hopeless if your heart really is in it. And if you say, no, I really do want this relationship. And we talk about it. And I actually went so far as to, okay, I'm a little dramatic. I went so far as to say the coffee shop day was a day that I celebrate every single year in our friendship. And he's like, why do you, like, you send me, like one year I went out and bought $400 worth of gift cards to different coffee shops all over the city and said, here, it's Dave, and I don't want to say this person's name. Let's say Dave Mark. Dave Mark Day. And he's like, what? And I said, it's Dave Mark Day. Just play with me. It's important to me because this day, and I've said plans, and every day I acknowledge this day for like, I don't even know, 6 or 7 years, because that is the guy I want to be. And I want to remember that's the guy I want to be, and that no conflict is hopeless. It just isn't. And it's like, if you're willing to work at it, Okay, some other really quick things it gets more descriptive. Some positive strategies for resolving conflict. This is cultural, by the way, I will say that. One of the things I would say is be direct and specific. Well, of course, and state the problem. I mean, that's just, of course. The important thing here is using owned messages. Owned messages is saying just I. I will tell you that most people in the United States react defensively in conflict when they hear the pronoun you. When we hear you, that silly pronoun becomes a trigger. And I always say, this is where I say, don't have a victim mentality. We don't say, you make me so mad. Don't you give somebody the power to make you mad. No. I feel angry. You take ownership for your feelings. If you say you make me so mad, then I guess I have to sit around and wait for you to make me happy again. It's like, no. Emotions come from the inside out, not the outside in. don't do that. By the way, it doesn't, well, the formula is I feel blank when you blank and because of blank, and I would like for you to blank. Sometimes when I'm just frustrated, if I can get the I feel part out, I'm happy. Okay, if we can just get that far. And it doesn't allow you to say anything, by the way, and say, I feel, and say, well, it's okay, I owned it. No, I was doing a role play once with human resource people in the city. And we were doing role play, and I said, we're gonna do this complex stuff. And this guy seriously got up and he made me giggle because it was just so absurd. I didn't say that to him, because that wouldn't have been productive. But he said to the young lady, and it was just a role play. I said, use own messages. Okay, I will. And he said, I want to throw up every time you enter the room. I was like, no, I think I'm still feeling a little defensive. I'm like, I appreciate the I feel. And then you didn't say you make me feel like I want to throw up. I'm like, no, it doesn't allow you just to say anything. But do you know how some people do? They'll say anything and they'll say, well, that's just, you know what? I owned it. I'm authentic. Authentic me. Authenticity is good. It's not great. Okay, you can't be. Ted Bundy was authentically a mass murderer. Okay, that doesn't make it good. It doesn't make it good just because we say, oh, well, that's just the way that person is. No, therapy will help. It's like you don't have to do that.
I've heard like that to say I feel is good, but to say I feel like doesn't count. Like you could say something like, I feel like you're a jerk.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because now all of a sudden you're discounting the I feel. It's kind of like I'm just tricking you with ownership. Well, I zap you at the same. It's like come closer, Father, come closer, and then smack. It's like, and that's why I got you to come closer. It's like, no. Do you know what I mean? Okay,
Jesus loves you, but everyone else thinks you're real.
I and then followed up with, but we'll pray for you. We'll pray for you. And I'm like, no, pray for you. Start with you. Start at home. Say your next rosary for yourself. And describe how you feel rather than being evaluative. And again, the focus is different. It's very different. And I put underneath it, be sorry, but not every second of the day. Okay, sometimes if you have to constantly say, I'm sorry, first of all, it gets desensitized. And also, after a while, I think, well, you are sorry. Stop it. You're just a sorry human being. Now stop that. It's like, be proactive rather than reactive. Some other positive strategies really quickly, be direct and specific, like I said. And focus on behaviors. It's not fair in my world. It's not fair to say to somebody, you have a bad attitude or you're selfish or something like that, that is very squishy and it's not easy to operationalize. And if somebody says, well, how do I have a bad attitude? You should be able to operationalize it. I was working with us. The city called me, not the county, the city called me to work with the manager. And I said, well, what's wrong with her? Or why am I doing this? And they said, you'll see. And I'm like, no, we're not playing that game. You're calling me for a reason. And they said, well, what's wrong with her communication? Well, she's hesitant. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does that? She needs to be more clear. How so? I needed tangible things I could hold on to. And I'm like, is this the feedback you're giving her? What is she doing? And then at one point, and these were all female managers, by the way, they said, well, and she talks and she communicates like a woman. And I'm like, well, she is. And I was like, what's wrong with that? And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. What are you talking about? And I said, never mind, I'll figure it out myself. And I thought the problem is you're not giving her any feedback to make changes. You need to focus. I can change a behavior and you can tell me how I've changed a behavior and my progress. But when you say you're just, you just have an attitude and I don't like it. How? And then when I say, well, how? I don't know. You just do. Everyone says that and we all feel it. I'm like, but how? And like, what do you mean? I have to do something for you to feel it. And I think it's just a cop out. Stop it. I know you would never do that, but others would. Fraction it if it's an ongoing conflict, we sometimes just need to break it apart. Enough said. Be assertive. Ooh, some of you are yes people. You do not like to say no to people. And you can say no without guilt. Of course, you have to triage life and say what's more important. I mean, sometimes the student comes into my office and they need something and I'm working on something important. I don't say no because they're more important right now. I mean, life gets, it's like Dave's emergency room. Come on in. You have to triage. But being assertive is saying what's on your mind while listening. If you just say what's on your mind without listening, that is not being assertive. That's being verbally aggressive. And there's a difference. And we don't do that. And sometimes the assertiveness part is when Mark tells his drama to Zach needs to be assertive enough to say, it's going to stop with me, or I don't even want to hear the rumors and the drama anymore. I just don't, after a while, maybe it's just again getting older and desensitized. It's just your dramas just aren't even good enough for me to pass on. It's like, shoot, it's not that good. Focus on interests, not positions, as a positive strategy, especially if you're having ongoing conflict. What's the difference? The difference between an interest and a position, a lot of times people just take their position over and over and over again. It's kind of like the I said what I said kind of comment back. And it's like the position, I get your position. What we need to do is ask questions of curiosity and say, why? Why do you have this position? That's going to lead to a better discussion. Having a ceasefire is not walking away and just walking out. A ceasefire is when you know you're irrational and you're crazy with a K and you say, my mother used to say, count to 10, young man. Just count to 10, or whatever, catch yourself. And sometimes I just need to say, you know what? Can I just have 2 minutes? 2 minutes to collect myself? Because sometimes I can't even think of the words correctly in conflict. They become so emotional and I'm afraid to say anything. And then I think of all the words later. And it's like, but sometimes we just need to have a ceasefire or watch your intensity level. This is definitely cultural to the United States. Okay. We do not like people in conflict have low intensity. Low intensity is, those people who look like they just came from a yoga class or they're Zen, or they just took a mitt full of Valium. And it's like, they're just like, why are you so upset? Calm down. It's okay. It's okay. And the reason I say this low intensity is not great. It looks sometimes like you don't care. You don't care about the issue. High intensity, obviously, is if you look like you're out of control and potentially aggressive, that I need some rational thinking. So what I want is a moderate level of intensity to show in your verbals and your nonverbals. Negative strategies, what's really cool about the negative strategies, we can turn them into positive by putting don't in front of them, okay? And it's easy. Gunny sacking, I know you've never done this, but gunny sacking is when you store, if you've lived with people, you've done it, okay? When you store up things that drive you crazy about the person, but you don't say it. But you kind of keep a little mental, you kind of put in your little gunny sack. A gunny sack's like a backpack. You put it back there and you just kind of hold on to it. And then all of a sudden something happens and you unload everything at once. And it's like you do, and first of all, stop it. Stop it. One at a time, you bring it up when it occurs. A true gunny sacker, this is twisted because it's like a true murderer. Okay. A true gunny sacker, they dump everything out that they've been thinking forever. And then do you know what they do? They pick it all right back up and they store it back up again to dump it out later. It's not resolved. Be like Elsa, let it go. Okay, just let it go. It's no. Avoidance, yes. For drama, using avoidance. If that's all you use, then yes, that is not great. Physical or topical. If you've ever physical avoidance, we can do that in the office. People will avoid you. They won't answer your emails. They will do whatever. Topical avoidance, if you've ever tried to have conflict with somebody or talk to them about an issue and they will keep diverting it to a different issue. No, fighting below the belt, you would never do that. That's where you know a person has a sensitive area and you attack to win. And again, it's hard for me. It's kind of like that we all in relationships have the don't go there kind of, and we don't. In romantic relationships, marriages, oftentimes we say, well, we don't go there. Don't go there. But you feel cornered and you want to win. And the only way to win is to go there. So you go right for the neck and you fight below the belt. Irrational, mean, horrible, of course. And now what happens? And again, it's hard because I would have to know personally. I can't even give you a good example because I'd have to say what's below the belt for you. But now what you've done, you've won, you will win. You probably will win that argument, but now you've created a memorable message, and the memorable message is, I cannot trust you. No matter how bad it got before, we didn't go there, and you just did. You changed the rules. Can we do this at work as well? Can somebody fight below the belt at work? Yeah, I think they can. If somebody, I don't even know what would be that for me. I guess if a colleague, a faculty member came into my classroom and started berating me or discounting me in front of my students or whatever, decreasing my credit, that to me would be kind of professionally fighting below the belt. But negative labeling, I can't even imagine when that's good. But we label people as difficult sometimes, or we say, ooh, they have that cold, difficult look to them. And I often bring, well, we can use this can of Diet Coke. I won't even bring, I did bring a can of hot just for my visual aid, but I'll use yours. You know, advertisers teach us to do this. We look at the label and I know what's on the inside. I know that it's a caramely, fizzy diet drink. I know how much is here. And we're trained almost by advertisers to do that. So what do? We look at people's labels and we think we know what's on the inside. I think I know demographically what you're like. I think I know, oh, you're a man. Oh, you're a woman. Oh, you're in this age group. Oh, you're in this perceived socioeconomic. You're this racial, da, 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 da. And I think I know what's on the inside. No, you don't. You don't. Allness is a negative strategy. Always is when you use those absolute words. That's the other thing that will create defensiveness in conflict. When you use absolutes, always, never, none. Don't use those words. We usually use them for drama. You never take the trash out. I always have to do it. Feels like it's trash day tomorrow for me. It's like, you know, I feel that. And then how does the other person respond? Oh no, I took the trash out 2 months ago. See, you're so stupid. You can't even remember that. It's like they take it literally. Don't do that. A silencer is when we give a fake emotional response to silence the person. We pretend we have a headache, cry, do whatever. Don't do that. Minimizing is when, and I think minimizing we can sometimes do well-intentioned. We tell the other person they have no reason to be upset. Why are you so upset? Calm down. It's okay. Stop telling me how to feel. Stop that. Get rid of the I'm the winner mentality. We go into a situation usually mentally with a zero-sum mentality. There's going to be a winner. And if there's going to be a winner, there's going to be a loser. And I don't usually pick loser for myself. So it's a +1 and a -1, zero sum. Instead, let's go in with a +2 mentality. I also do have to mention forgiveness, of course, in all of this, that it is, for me, it's a process. It's not an epiphany. We need it for our own healing, not for the other person. I forgive people all the time without ever saying they're right. Like, you don't have to admit that the other person was right to forgive them, or I don't, at least. I'm like, no. And just because somebody forgives you doesn't mean that they'll treat you better, or you forgive them, that they'll treat you better. Organizations sometimes also need to apologize. I'll tell you that there are organizations that are sometimes very scared. I will tell you that when our former president, when we just got a new president at the college, our former president, when he first arrived, there was a big faculty. It wasn't his situation, but there was a faculty member whose tenure was really messed up through a situation, and this president, that's a big deal for faculty. And this president kind of inherited it, and they asked me if I would sit in on it. And this guy was really upset and everything, and it wasn't his fault. It really wasn't. This president said, oh, we need to fix this. We need to fix this. And at some point in the conversation, he said, Dave, we just need to move on. We just need to move forward. And I said, no, Kevin. No, we don't. And first of all, he's the president. I'm not. And he just gets there and I'm telling him what to do. And they said, we don't need to move on. Do you know what? Somebody needs to tell that man, the faculty member, that we're sorry. And then we can move on. But organizations oftentimes won't apologize because they're so litigious. And then lastly, granting grace, which I think is really important. And this is where we'll end. And I think this is what we all need to do. And I'm just going to read this. And I know it's not our closing prayer, but it's close. But granting grace to me, I think, is what we all need to do in order to perhaps resolve conflict. And it states, grace is granting forgiveness or putting aside your own needs when there's no standard that says that we should or must do so. Rather than being prompted by rules, rewards, or expectations, grace springs from a generosity of personal spirit. For an act to be one of grace, it must be done without conditions or expectations of return. Thus, it is not passive, but active, a deliberate choice to be gracious. Grace is not about forgiving when we should. For instance, excusing people who are not responsible for their actions. Also, grace is not about allowing others to have their way when we have no choice. Instead, grace is unearned and unnecessary kindness. It's an act of grace to defer to another's preference when you could hold out for your own. Similarly, when someone hurts us and has no right to expect forgiveness, we may choose to forgive anyway. We do so not because we have to, but because we want to forgive. Grace is a matter of choice. Grace is given without strings. Grace involves letting go, which is to free ourselves from anger, blame, and judgments about what another has done. When we let go of these feelings, we release others and ourselves from their consequences. Sometimes we tell a friend we'll forgive him for an offense, but then later we remind him of it. We may say we'll forget a romantic transgression by our partner, but then hold it against her. When we continue to hang on to blame and judgment, we have not really let go. So we've not really shown grace. There's no grace when we blackmail others for kindness or hang on to hostile feelings. And an act of grace must be done graciously. It is not grace to yield to a friend and snap, okay, have it your own darn way. Grace does not create feeling of debt in others. Grace involves letting go of hostile feelings and blame with a style that is as gracious as what we actually do. I think sometimes forget about all the academic stuff. If we just did this, I think conflict would be resolved a lot, even in our own head, a lot easier, a lot easier. The end. Love, Dave. Okay, and you have 13 extra minutes, you lucky ducks. You lucky ducks.
Dave, thanks so much.
Anytime.
Your experience.
Next week.
No.
No.
Your insights and yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
And you have evaluation forms. I am present to the time. So if you would like to take the questions and then email me, that's fine. Yes. And then July 12th, I will be sending you detailed information, like it would be a work day, service day. So, you know, I'll send you like dress appropriately for getting outside and doing work or whatever. So, and then other Mike, would you be willing to offer a blessing, closing blessing?
Oh, sure. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Lord, giver of all grace, may you extend your grace upon us, so that we then may extend that grace to others. To all those we encounter, those we come in conflict with, those we don't like, those we disagree with, anybody for whom which we have bad thoughts or bad feelings about, may you offer us the grace to become in relationship with them, to develop charity and respect and understanding with them. As we go on our way tonight, please extend your grace upon our journeys, upon Dave's journey and his role of as a professor, the teacher of young minds. He may continue his wonderful cares and his gifts and share it with others. And for all the rest of us as we go about our weeks, that in whatever ways in which we can extend Christ to others and his grace, may you make known to us those opportunities. May you make it clear to us where we can bring you to others and where we can be open when others bring you to us. So we ask this all in the name of Christ, and we ask you to bless all of us here in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great holiday weekend.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Oh, I forgot about that.
And Brooke, thanks for joining us. So glad you could be on with us.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for offering the virtual option, and thanks, Dave, for your presentation.
Thank you.
And Brooke, I sent you the questions by email for the evaluation.